Hello Flame community, this is Jeff Kyle with the Flame Learning Channel. With the release of Flame 2024, your ability to view metadata in the timeline has become easier than ever before. There are a handful of new features and some excellent quality of life improvements that will absolutely speed things up for anyone using metadata in the timeline. Whether you're a frequent burn-in metadata user or you've never heard of it before, this video will get you up to speed on what's changed and what's new. I'll be showing you where to find the Metadata Overlay Mode in the player, explaining some of the new quality of life improvements, showing you how to save, load, and share presets, and end by going over what it looks like to export with the metadata applied to your footage. Traditionally, burn-in metadata in Flame is a timeline effect that allows you to display a variety of information about your current clip in the player. It's typically used to, at a glance, know what frame you're on, what the timecode values are, what the file name or file path might be, and so on. In Flame 2024, if you head on over to the Overlays panel, you'll see a new section called Metadata, which is where you can find the metadata overlay and its settings. Additionally, every player, whether it's in the Conform tab, the timeline, or in any full screen player, will have a brand new button. This one right here that looks like a stack of papers. That is the Metadata Overlay button, and it allows you to toggle your metadata overlay on and off without the need for any timeline effects. If you're a fan of keyboard shortcuts, that's F10 to toggle the overlay on and off. One great use case for the metadata overlay is to turn it on in the Conform tab while you're linking footage for a conform. It'll display information about unlinked media in the preview pane, so you don't have to look far to figure out the timecode information or the file name information you need to help link your media. The arrow next to the metadata overlay icon opens up a drop-down menu listing the presets that come with Flame by default, as well as any shared or user presets that you might make yourself. The built-in Autodesk presets that ship with Flame are a great starting point, but to adjust them to fit your needs, open up the metadata overlay drop-down box and select Edit Setup. If you've used burn-in metadata before, this screen will be relatively familiar, but there are a few subtle differences. This little button on the bottom left here refers to which track the metadata overlay is looking at. The primary track, which is whatever the primary track is set to, and the background track, which is always the bottommost track, or track 1. Setting this to the background track can be useful if you have legals or graphics in your sequence but don't want to look at the metadata for those clips. Setting this field to background will ensure you're getting the metadata from the media on the bottommost timeline track. Next, we have our list of available metadata to choose from, and it has grown quite a bit. Batch and batch effects will allow you to pick up the batch iteration name, the batch name, or the iteration number of a clip that has been flagged as being a batch render, either from your batches render node, write node, open clip, or batch effects. The only catch here is that if you're working with media from a previous version of Flame, then Flame doesn't have the metadata to know whether or not it's been rendered from batch. So this field is only for Flame 2024 renders and any subsequent versions of Flame. Media status allows you to see whether a clip is unlinked or missing, which would appear by default without the metadata overlay, but now you have the ability to control where and how this is displayed with the overlay settings. Some of the other new fields include handles, the media cache status, and segment index. Finally, the timeline effects metadata goes a little deeper, giving you an abbreviated indication of which timeline effects are used, with special attention to the time warp timeline effects, giving you time warp only options, as well as the ability to see the time warp speed as a percentage. One more note about timeline effects, this is using the track setting in that it will display the primary track or the background track, but it will always ignore any gap effects you have in your timeline. Those are the newly added metadata overlay elements, but a few of the existing elements have been updated to include some additional information. For example, previously the frame field, as well as the source and record timecode fields, only gave you the option to show your current frame or current timecode or a custom value. Now, those settings have the ability to display not only the start, current, and end frames, but also a handful of combinations of start current, current end, and all three in start current end. Just as before, you can choose just how it's getting its frame number. Source media looks at its start frame as it was imported or set. Timeline/clip displays the start, current, or end frame similar to record timecode for the sequence in question, and doesn't include any specific information about the clips. The segment option has been split into two to give more flexibility. Relative, which starts every clip at frame 1 and indicates the first, current, and end frame relative to a start frame of 1. And absolute, which treats the first frame of the sequence as frame 1, but at each new clip, flame indicates the start frame and end frame values of the clip in question relative to the sequence as a whole. And finally, the source name field now has the ability to display the name of the RGB channel as well as the name of the matte channel. One other new feature here is the ability to include segment information about audio tracks. To do so, you add in a segment or source name field, but instead of having the track set to video, you can switch that to audio and it will include the name of the audio track. Once you've created your metadata overlay masterpiece and you're ready to save your work, you can do so the same way you're used to saving any timeline effects, even though this isn't a timeline effect. Note that the name field here shows you which preset you used as a starting point, but has the asterisk next to it to indicate that you've changed something. To save, it's right here using this Save button. The default location here is your user's metadata overlay setups, but at the lower left corner of the screen you can switch to a shared location for other users on your network if you'd like to share your work with your team. Now, when we leave the metadata overlay setup area, go back to the timeline, and go to the metadata overlay dropdown, we can see the preset I just saved and can load it as easy as that. If you want to burn the metadata information into the clip you export, you'll have to load your metadata overlay setup in a burn-in metadata timeline effect. Luckily, converting an overlay to a timeline effect is quite easy. I'll head back to the metadata overlay setup and go to the Save button. In the lower left corner, I'll switch the setups directory to Project and save my metadata setup. Now, when I leave the metadata overlay setup and navigate back to my timeline, I can add a new track, and with the Effects ribbon, add a Gap Effect Burn-In Metadata Timeline Effect. I'll double-click on the timeline effect to load up the settings, and then click the Load button. By default, it puts us right in the project location, and there's the setup I saved just a few moments ago. Now, we aren't using the metadata overlay, but rather a timeline effects node that has all the same information, but this one can be exported with the metadata burned in. If you like these videos and you're finding them helpful, please subscribe to the Flame Learning channel and click the bell to stay notified about new content. Feel free to comment any questions or suggestions below. Until next time, thanks a bunch for watching.